There are a ton of different conspiracy theories around, and these are some of the ones that I find to be so trippy that they genuinely change the way that I look at life sometimes. It freaks me out. All right, the first thing I want to talk about is a follow-up on the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So we talked about the conspiracy theory that Charlie Kirk was possibly assassinated by the government. Some people think the Trump administration, some people think the Israeli government. There's a lot of conspiracy theories, and we've talked about them before. Most of these conspiracy theories are coming from Candace Owens, who was good friends with Charlie Kirk, and she is still continuously using her platform to say that there was something wrong with this assassination. Like, there's something suspicious about it. She doesn't believe Tyler Robinson was the person who shot Charlie Kirk. There's obviously been a lot of conspiracy theory and speculation, but Candace recently released these text messages that I found to be very, very interesting between her and Charlie Kirk, allegedly. But basically, Charlie wrote to Candace Owens saying, "Anyway, I'm not sure I will live to see the end of this revolution. I believe you were the piece that God meant me to meet that will finish the fight. Since the beginning of Turning Point USA, I knew in my gut that I might get wiped out at any time. I cannot explain it, but I dream about it all the time, like all the time. Anyway, that's depressing convo for another time." And Candace said, "That's so weird, more of a fear manifestation than actualization." And he said, "Not really afraid of it, but I'm just telling what I know to be true." So what the hell? Like, if that's real, that is very, very creepy and strange and interesting that he has literally talked about being taken out before. It honestly kind of confirms that there is some sort of conspiracy theory here, in my opinion, because if this is real text messages between Charlie and Candace, I think it kind of proves the idea that Charlie was scared, or at least thought that something was going to happen to him. And then it's interesting that obviously it did, and now Candace Owens is the one screaming from the rooftop saying that there's more to the story here, and that she's blaming Turning Point USA and she's blaming the Trump administration, and she thinks that there is something sketchy going on here. And honestly, I gotta say, don't really ever agree with her, but in this instance, I do. I do think that there is something weird about Charlie Kirk's death. According to Candace, she also has only released a fraction of the proof or information that she has specifically against Turning Point USA and how they had silenced Charlie, and basically he knew that his death was coming. And again, Turning Point made a blunt statement saying these claims are false, fabricated, and dishonor Charlie's memory, but a lot of people think that it's true. But I will say that I think the reason I do think that there was something more to his assassination is not just because Candace Owens is talking about it, but it's because no one is stopping her from talking about it, if that makes sense. Like, there's no cease and desist, there's no suing happening. Like, if she was lying about things outright, I'm sure a lot of people would be taking a legal route against her, but they're not, because they can't, because it's true, which is obviously very interesting. I do want to hear what you guys think about this on more of an updated timeline, because we haven't talked about it much since it happened, but I still believe the theory that Tyler Robinson didn't assassinate Charlie Kirk. According to Candace Owens, she's spoken to Tyler Robinson's like close friends and family, and they claim that he's never even been to the campus and that he is just 100% innocent. And I don't know. I do think there were a lot of oddities, like him changing his outfits so many times, and the fact that the photos of the guy like in the sunglasses and the America shirt don't look like Tyler Robinson. Like, I don't know. This entire thing has just never sat right with me, and I do think that there is a bigger conspiracy picture here, and it does genuinely freak me out a lot, because obviously the concept of the government infiltrating with someone who they disagree with and then murdering them is not like a new conspiracy theory. We've seen JFK, Marilyn Monroe, John Lennon, etc. There's so many different examples of this where people think the government was secretly involved in these people's deaths. And it really does put a whole different perspective on how much it is us versus them. And I think that that is what really trips me out about this specific thing, is that this is another situation of somewhere that the government, whether you want to think it's the Trump administration, the Israeli government, there's honestly a lot of conspiracy here, but somewhere within this space is just corrupt. That always changes the way I think about things. Like, I don't know how to explain it other than that. Like, I think that the government is probably so much more corrupt than we think. And I think that like stuff like this is really just like easy for them to get away with. And that's kind of crazy, but I don't know. And I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this. And I definitely wouldn't say this is the first time the government maybe was involved with something shady, because it's certainly not, but it is interesting to hear it from somebody who was such a fan of the current administration and someone who was always conservative and, you know, wanted to agree with what the government was saying, question it. Like, that's interesting to me. Like, hearing Candace Owens like take a step back and be like, no, this is like, something's wrong here. It's not like Democrat, Republican, it's us versus them. It is the powerful and elite versus the civilians. And I do think that's true. And it honestly makes me panic. I feel like I know there's nothing like I could do about it, but it really freaks me out. But anyway, speaking of other conspiracy theories that I don't know what to do about, the phantom time hypothesis / false history theory is something that absolutely fucks me up. So the phantom time hypothesis began in 1991 when a German historian noticed some strange inconsistencies in medieval European records. There was missing architecture, overlapping rulers, and astronomical misalignments. And his overall conclusion was that roughly 297 years of history from AD 614 to 911, don't like that, never happened. So according to this historian, the early Middle Ages was invented, probably during the reign of Holy Roman Emperor Otto III and Pope Sylvester II, who allegedly recalibrated the calendar so that they could rule in the symbolic year of 1000. In other words, to fulfill this prophecy of ruling in this specific year, the church and the crown didn't want to wait for the millennium, they created it instead. And if this historian is correct, then we're not living in the 21st century, we're living in the 18th century, which is just weird when you think about it. It's honestly kind of convincing because this man really did explore genuine gaps in historical records, and after Rome's collapse, Europe's paper trails got thin, there were fewer artifacts, there were inconsistent timelines, and strange overlaps. And I do think that this is an interesting theory. He also pointed out that carbon dating some of the early medieval sites seemed off by centuries, and that medieval architecture appeared to jump into sophistication with no gradual evolution. He even cited discrepancies in ancient astronomical events, and particularly solar eclipses, claiming that they didn't line up with the modern calculations if those missing years were real. So to me, the reason I think this theory is interesting is the concept of like, what if everyone just made that up? Like, obviously we have like artifacts and things that existed, but I'm like, what if it's just fake? You know, like, I don't know, it scares me because I'm like, if they did just decide to lie about this, is it that crazy of a concept that they were like, no, let's just say it's year 1000 now? No. Like, I don't think it's that insane. And I think that there probably is a lot of discrepancy when it comes to time. And the idea of a fabricated past or history, honestly, it's not that nuts to me. I really think it could be true, because the truth about it is that history does get rewritten, and it's just like, not in just ways like of conspiracy theories, but in translation errors, propaganda, censorship, and selective storytelling. Overall, there is always going to be discrepancies with what life was actually like and what things actually happened and what didn't. So that like kernel of truth kind of gives this theory life. When you learn how often texts change, or how archives disappear, or how national myths are just crafted and made up, it's very easy to believe that something bigger is being hidden. And I don't know, I think it could be true, and it freaks me out. I think this also kind of coincides to me with the overall conspiracy theory that time is just an illusion and that we're all existing in the same time and that time doesn't exist. I don't like thinking about it because it stresses me out, and I don't know. Like the last Thursday theory, the idea that everything actually just happened last Thursday, I hate that. And I do think, yes, time is a social construct, but also it's like a real thing. But a lot of people believe that it's like kind of not, and that it's not linear, and that's why we can hop timelines and manifest and do different things, and there's parallel universes, etc. And I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. It's stressful to me. The next conspiracy theory genuinely freaks me out a lot when I think about it, and it is the terrifying explanation as to why we're alone in the universe, which a lot of people don't think we are. A lot of people think that within the entirety of space, there are other galaxies and other living human beings or creatures, aliens, whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, let's pretend that we are the anomaly. We're the only ones here. A lot of people talk about conspiracy theories as to why that would be, and those are what freak me out. Like, I honestly think if we are the anomaly, that's scarier than there being aliens, you know? And it basically has to do with the theory of the Great Filter, which is basically that somewhere outside of our galaxy, there is this barrier that no species could survive past, and that is why we are the anomaly. So the origins of this Great Filter theory trace back to the Fermi paradox, which was named for physicist Enrico Fermi. And basically one day he kind of asked, where is everybody? If the galaxy is so old and so fertile, why haven't its inhabitants colonized the stars? And it's a valid question, but in the 1990s, a man named Robin Hansen kind of gave the paradox a darker twist, which is basically the idea that maybe these civilizations do arise, they just don't make it very far. And that's kind of the concerning part. So basically somewhere in the universe, there is this invisible obstacle called the Great Filter that sucks in anything. Like, I guess you can consider it maybe a black hole, but I think it's a little bit different than that. And it basically kills off everyone and everything that passes it. So there are like 3 different things as to where people believe this Great Filter is. Some people think it's behind us, that the filter is in our past, and that humanity is a cosmic miracle, an anomaly, and that is why we are alone, is that somehow it just happened where we were able to pass through this filter and still continue to have planet Earth and the Milky Way galaxy. I don't know. And then other people think that this filter is happening right now, like civilizations reach this industrial power and destroy themselves before spreading, like nuclear war, climate collapse, AI misalignment, and all of that stuff. It could be the theoretical wall or filter. So it's basically a self-fulfilling prophecy, and the Great Filter is more metaphorical in the sense of every civilization will eventually destroy themselves, and we just haven't gotten there yet. Which is also what leads us to the future. That's where a lot of people believe the Great Filter waits for us, and I don't like that. And a lot of people think that basically the universe is meant to self-implode and that we're all kind of screwed. So I don't like thinking about it. I mean, it's not necessarily that far off anyway, because in 2024, a group of researchers from Oxford basically modeled potential extinction timelines, and they all concluded that humanity's probability of surviving the next millennium without catastrophic self-destruction was roughly 1 in 6. So that's not looking good for us, you know? So are we just getting closer and closer to this Great Filter where we eventually ruin our own lives and self-destruct that other planets have already gotten to and done so, and that's why we are alone? I don't know, but I don't like it. Honestly, again, this is why I like to believe aliens are real. I do believe it, and it makes me less scared than the concept of us being alone. I want to go a little bit more into the science behind the idea that time is an illusion, because there is kind of a lot of experiments that do suggest that this is true. So the next theory has to do with the internet memory hole, which is essentially the idea about how digital age is quietly erasing our past. So obviously, the internet kind of promises a sense of like immortality. It was supposed to remember everything, and once you put it on the internet, it never goes away. Like that whole concept. But at the end of the day, there have been a lot of people who feel like there are things that have happened that just completely go missing from the internet, completely scrubbed. And I have to say, I agree. So a lot of this theory and like the origin of it comes from the book 1984 by George Orwell. And in his dystopian world, the government workers basically rewrite history by tossing inconvenient documents into a memory hole. Then once these records are gone and burned, none of that ever actually existed. So obviously this is all fiction until the internet kind of made this real. If you think about it, everyone always says like the internet's forever, but I think that's kind of not actually true. Like we've definitely seen things that have disappeared completely, and it's kind of like a modern memory hole at work. So in 2024, Pew Research Center studied that basically found that 38% of web pages created in 2013 no longer exist. That's a decade's worth of information gone. That's kind of crazy. And even within Wikipedia, over a quarter of cited links are dead. Like you can't click the link, it won't work. So many different things, court rulings, news articles, academic references, all vanished. It's concerning because when data disappears, so does accountability and the fact that we can say, oh, this happened, because then it's just suddenly gone. I think that the internet really poses as an illusion of permanence. Like we have always been taught that the internet's forever, forever because our screens make it feel like that. But what's interesting to me is when you research old like news stories, for example, you'll find a lot of blogs and rewritten summaries about the things, but sometimes you can never actually find the original article about what happened when it happened. And again, the internet doesn't erase through deletion, it kind of erases through replacement. So a lot of these original websites and such get literally buried over time. Like the MySpace music purge of 2019, that deleted over 50 million songs overnight. No backups, no archives, they were just gone. For a lot of musicians, that was their only record. And so just like that, a ton of people's artwork was erased by bad file management, which is kind of nuts. In 2022, researchers found that dozens of official government pages about environmental data had been quietly edited or deleted, which is concerning. A lot of scientific reports have vanished, language was softened, no announcement, no scandal, just quiet deletion, which is probably happening way more than you think. And a lot of stuff slips through the cracks on the internet because of this. And a lot of people think that the dark web has archives upon archives of various things that have just been completely erased from the internet or censored. And I think that that could be true because at the end of the day, I feel like we've all experienced situations where it feels like something that we're looking into or a topic that we're talking about is getting censored, especially like on TikTok. I always see people's TikToks talking about how certain search words won't show up for them, but show up in other countries and all of that stuff. And I do think it is very interesting and kind of scary. As AI is getting better and better, it does scare me that there is a point where we will get to every article and every news source being written by AI, and I don't really think we're that far off, not gonna lie. Don't get me wrong, digital footprints can definitely be lethal. Look at Hailey Bieber. But at the end of the day, there is definitely so much stuff that gets deleted, and it's so interesting. It kind of coincides with the Mandela effect for a lot of people. A lot of people think the government, the Illuminati, whatever you want to call it, like created the Mandela effect to see how much we would notice if they just changed things like logos or spelling or emojis that simply never existed anymore. And I think that's an interesting concept because it does give them kind of a gauge of how much they can get away with. I don't know. Do I think the government is using that to their advantage? Probably. Which leads us to our last conspiracy theory that I want to talk about, which is the idea of deliberate government disinformation programs and basically the art of making you doubt everything. And I think this is definitely happening. I think we've gotten to a point on social media and the internet and honestly like the news outlets in general where instead of people hiding information, they actually just saturate the world with so much of it that you don't know what's real anymore. Especially now with AI, I think that this is such an interesting concept. Like anytime I see a video of someone promoting something or saying something controversial, I'm like, is this AI? And sometimes it is and sometimes it's not. And I don't really like that it's not regulated enough for us to be told when a video is AI. Like it's going to get out of hand and it's going to get out of hand very quickly. I can guarantee it. I think at this point, the government or whatever realized that hiding information is not working, but instead confusing the public makes more sense. And the government has like used this before with Operation Mockingbird, where basically they recruited and influenced hundreds of reporters in major newspapers or television outlets, and they manipulated them, they forged documents, and basically had like mass chaos spreading around, and no one knew what was true or false. Which that kind of narrative of people trying to figure out what's real and what's not low-key hides the truth a lot more than you think. Like it kind of could make the truth go undetected. And I think that there's truth to that. For centuries, the government has been trying to shape public opinion, test psychological triggers, and learn exactly how long it takes for falsehood to become a real memory to people and think that something actually did or didn't happen. I do think that this is a very interesting concept because the formula works. If you think about it, like there's with every real like news leak, there's 5 other fake ones that are kind of diluting the real thing that actually happened. And I do feel like I noticed that continuously happening over and over again, especially in the last like 5 years. Like anytime there's like a legitimate thing that someone is doing that's wrong, I feel like 5 other things about them come out that are just ridiculous and everyone else starts talking about those things instead of the actual problem. And I think it's kind of become a self-running machine. Like I don't even know if the government government has to do much anymore about it. It seems like a lot of this stuff kind of just flows naturally. I also just think it's a scary concept overall that a lot of these social networks and news sources, media in general, realize that they don't need to necessarily censor the truth, they just need to drown it. Like there's so many things, especially like in politics, where someone will say something that was like actually so crazy, but then they say 12 other things that kind of just cover up that in a way that is better for them overall. It's fucked up. And I obviously think AI has exacerbated the issue a lot, because now it doesn't even have to be real things that come out about stuff. Like it could be dozens of fake stories or fake news, fake articles, fake videos of people saying things that they didn't. And it just gets people questioning whether or not things actually happened. And it's kind of scary. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this overall, because I do think that the internet has gotten to a point of no return for sure. Like I do think that there are things that get hidden, things that get deleted, things that get thrown out, obviously, but I also do think that there are tactics that the government or the media, whatever you want to call it, Illuminati, use to infiltrate things that actually happen and distract us from them. I don't know. I've always believed it to be true. But anyway, that is it for today's video. If you guys liked it, please give it a big thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of these different conspiracy theories. And are there any conspiracy theories that completely change the way that you think about things? Because I want to hear them. But anyway, that is it. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, and subscribe for new videos every week. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.